Hello. So today I'm here to talk to you about law, history, and just the stories of people in general. Today, more than ever, we are shaping our present by what happened in the past. We're shaping our futures by understanding how we are moving ahead. I'm going to be talking about a very small community in this country, the Jews of India. I often get questions, oh, are there Jews in India? We thought they were just in Israel. But India has had such a beautiful, rich history of understanding Jews and having them for millennials, if not centuries. But to start with it, I'd like to understand why history firstly matters at all, and why should we look at it through the spectrum of law, through religion, and through courts. The Supreme Court had the opportunity to decide on a particular land whether there should be a mosque or a temple. And now, even till today, we are looking at Supreme Court cases which deal with minorities more than ever, looking at their representation, the reservation that they have. So, the central question that exists is, why does history matter? What does history offer us? And particularly, why is history not questioned at all? Today, when we look at sciences, we see that it's often questioned with the hypothesis, asked for evidence. But when it comes to history, we often tend to just read what authors have said without looking at the sources that they use. And today, more than ever, when conflicts are driven on account of religion, we really need to go ahead and ask, why does history matter and what the potential it can embrace? And is history only limited to the way we are taught it in school, looking at the textbooks that we have? Or does it go beyond? Or does it go beyond and tell us a story of a community? And what can we learn from those communities? History shapes our identity, and hence it's central that we understand where we come from, where others come from, so that we can create a more tolerable society for everybody. So the Jews of India have been quite a fascinating community. They have existed in India since time immemorial. One of the most ancient communities who's thought to be one of the lost tribes, who ended on the coasts of Cochin and settled themselves there. They were the Cochin Jews. There was another tribe that came and settled in Bombay. They're called the Bene Israel Jews. And a third tribe that immigrated from Baghdad were the Baghdadi Jews who settled in Calcutta. More importantly, in 1947, when partition happened, the state of Israel was established for Jews across the world. So any Jewish person living in anywhere, any part of this world, could come and settle in Israel. And that is what they had. The state of Israel was born. And it was very essential that these people would come and claim their motherland, because according to their history, which was thousands of years ago, they had predicted that Jews would come back and settle in Israel and claim their rightful place in their country. So who was central in bringing them there back in 1947 and 1948? The Jewish Agency. So the Jewish Agency is a Zionist organization that has brought about 3 million people to Israel, supporting them, giving them resources while they immigrate to Israel. So if you are a Jewish person anywhere in this world, you have a rightful aim to go to Israel and claim their citizenship. So when this news of a new state only for Jews was given, the Jews of India thought that this was also an opportunity for them to go ahead and settle in a country where they could call themselves home, where they could find new opportunities. So despite existing in this country since the ancient times, they thought that we could have the opportunity of going to Israel and settling there. So the people from these three places, that is Bombay, Calcutta, went and decided that we would go and claim our rightful places. And mind you, these people were quite educated. They were businessmen, they were lawyers, they were doctors, who sold their practices, who sold their businesses, in the hope that they would go back to Israel and start a new life with more opportunities in a more religious setting. So the Jewish Agency at that time went to the different synagogues and different Jewish schools that existed in India. They told them about a land where they could build a life for themselves, with many resources. It was a land that was being made after World War II. So European Jews were going to Israel after what the horrors that we saw back during World War II in Germany. Similarly, there was a different situation that existed in India. A partition of British India, which made India into two different countries, Pakistan and India. So the Jews who existed and had a vibrant culture in Karachi went from Karachi to Bombay because Pakistan, being a state that is founded on theological ideology, would not necessarily support minorities such as Jews. And they felt that India was the next best bet they had back in 1947. So they boarded on ships and went from Karachi to Bombay. Many even made trips to Pune in order to settle, in order to create and rebuild a life for themselves in this country. But soon, in 1948, when Israel was formed, they thought that maybe we should start a new life in a country that would accept us as our own, accept us on the aspect of their religion. So many people sold their practices, went ahead, took ships to Israel from Bombay. They made this trip, but when they landed there, was it the promised land that they thought? Absolutely not. It was a colossal disappointment for all of them. Because upon their arrival in Israel, they were separated into European Jews and non-European Jews. They were being promised that their children would have quality education. They were promised that they would have quality living. They would have quality medical aspects given to them, medical assistance. But all of it turned out to be false. While many of them saw that their counterparts, European Jews, were being given villas and flats and houses, the Indian Jews and South Asian Jews were more put into huts in poor living conditions. They were not even given jobs according to their previous occupations back in India. So you had doctors, lawyers, businessmen with great amount of skills being put into clerical positions. And that, of course, agitated them. Because they left a land which they called their home for centuries. Their generations grew up in the hope that they would find something better in Israel. But that wasn't true at all. The children were also not given quality education. The medical facilities available to them were at most very poor. So what did they do then? What was the option that they could have availed? Firstly, they started by protesting. They started writing letters to the government, the Israeli government. They started writing letters to the UN. They started writing letters to the Indian government, stating that their condition back here is really poor. They had a beautiful life in India. They wrote a letter to Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru at that time, in which they say that please get us back to our motherland, India. Long live India. It gives us an aspect of what exactly motherland meant for these people. Was it a physical existence of a land, or was it something where they could call themselves at home? So is the concept of a motherland physical one, or rather the one that we carry with ourselves? After multiple protests, they had a chance to come back to India. Almost 5,300 Israeli Indians who had gone to Israel from India made a trip back to their homes. And in 2011, the person who had started this entire petitioning, these letters that were being signed, even if you see these letters that were being sent, many of them have signed them in Marathi. Many of them have signed them in Hindi. It just shows that these people were us. These people were nothing different from what had transpired in this country. Were they very different from Indians? Not at all. Most of them have names which are so Indian that we would not even question if they're Jewish. They had given up their citizenships. So it was very challenging on an international perspective to get them back. It was very challenging for them to come back and regain their Indian citizenship. But our government went ahead and helped them and brought them back. As you can see, many of the early Bollywood actresses who were in cinema were actually Jewish women. So you see Nadira, you see Sulochna. All of these women had very different names. So Sulochna, her name was Rose Myers. but all of them took different names and made a name for themselves in this thing. In fact, the first Miss India in 1947 was a Jewish woman, Esther Victoria Abrahams, but people popularly knew her as Pramila. So my question is, what does this community teach us? Why is it relevant for us to know about this community? Firstly, it is a story of a minority that is often erased from the Indian history. So much so that people are questioning, oh, are there Jews in India? It is important for us to acknowledge these minorities. It is important for us to understand where they come from so that we can create a more tolerable society in general. 3 things that they taught me. Firstly was resilience. Within a span of a decade, they moved from Karachi to India, to Pune, and then again to Israel, and then back again from Israel to India. Such a journey it has been for them. But what does it mean? They were resilient throughout, despite multiple failures to establish a permanent home. They stood back to the opportunity and made a place for themselves. Second thing that they taught me was adaptability. So despite them coming from a land which was perhaps not their own, settling in a place, they preserved their traditions. In University of Edinburgh, they've recently found Judeo-Marathi scripts. And even back in Israel today, many of the Jewish communities of India use Judeo-Malayalam. So they adapted to new cultures, but they also preserved themselves. So in order to assimilate in a society, it's not that we give up our own identities. We rather conserve them and we create what's new. The third thing that they taught me was the diversity of India. Despite such resilience of going to Israel, trying to make that their home, they had to make a trip back and they found themselves in India. So despite what colonial historians wrote about India, which favored colonial policies, stating that India was a divided nation, they were always at war with each other on account of religion, they miss out the point that this community tells us. India has been a land of many minorities who have existed here for centuries and existed here preserving their tradition while also adapting to new ones. We live in a new India where it is absolutely essential for us to also understand this aspect of tolerance. So while we move ahead, I urge you to stop and look at people around you. Understand where they come from. What do they offer us? What is their story and what is their history? Because it is absolutely essential for us to know that the forces that seek to unite us are much, much stronger than the forces that seek to divide us. Thank you.